So I'm on break at the Cognitive Remediation Conference, and I've written a lot. And like usual, it's not related to the content that they're saying, but extrapolated to my own context that I create. And I'm seeing now how the brain prefers to live in stories. And it creates stories as an epiphenomenon of not paying attention. Stories are from the past and from memory, and usually in daily life we relate based on stories, but what happened, blah, blah, blah. We don't relate based on what's in the moment now and creating. So I'm seeing that part of this return mechanism is creating stories. So when one goes far into creativity, but others aren't there too, coming back to the level of the consensus consciousness is when the brain can make stories, which when one goes far into creativity and is coming back, those stories are of the past, and then they're emphasized and amplified, and then that is part of what is seen as a hallucination or delusion. But really, the brain is in a different operating system, which is creativity, which moves the brain beyond trauma, or even what is thought of as cognition at this point. Cognition is about stories and planning and organizing and operating based on thought, which is rearranging thoughts in our head and using that as an approximation to walk through reality. And when we're doing that, we're not in the mode of perception action, which is creativity. So I'm seeing this other mechanism, and it's kind of fascinating. And I've written down way too many notes to get to all of them by talking to myself on video, I think. So I might do an audio talking about the extrapolations, because again, it's not the content that they're saying. I don't even know what they said most of the time, but what they're saying is extrapolating to this other way of seeing and thinking about it. They have their way that they're training people to see and think, which is cognitive remediation, but I'm seeing something else. It's something about going into creativity, which is no selfhood, and the self is that which gets traumatized and needs healing, and the self is that which breaks down, and that affects so-called cognition. But again, it's not about getting that type of cognition back. It's about moving in a completely different way in the brain, which is a creativity algorithm. So I'm grateful for being here and having these extrapolations, but I don't really see it as something that helpful. And they haven't really talked about medications causing these effects of the decrease in cognition. They say cognitive remediation is a parallel treatment, so medications help the negative symptoms and things like that, and then the cognitive remediation helps the cognition. But I have experienced what this does to cognition, what the meds do. When I was in California in March, I had to take Seroquel for a couple weeks, and I could barely function. I could barely do any computer work. It was confusing. It was hard. Just to do a few basic calculations on the computer was hard. To do task 1, step 2, step 3. It was so hard and so difficult. So I know firsthand what that crappy chemical toxic drug crap does to the brain. So they haven't really said that. So I feel that creativity and a different something can be designed to help people move out of all of this altogether. And that's the key. People would rather be entertained with a good story, and we walk around entertaining each other and not living life and moving with the moment and creating the moment and seeing what's there now actually together. So how does one create that? And during this conference, I'm very aware of how education destroys the human brain. Somebody on the break told me that cognitive remediation came from brain injury. It helps people with brain injury, traumatic brain injury, if they have a head injury or whatever. So it's showing that the brain is injured. And a lot of so-called psychotic disorders happen between 15 and 24. So I think what happens is by 15, all of our creativity and natural human capacities of curiosity and learning have been drilled out of us through the current education system. And the brain sees the meaningless life that it's on the trajectory of. And a lot of times, if there's some trauma that happens, that adds to the meaninglessness of it all, because the whole society isn't safe. We're not safe together. It's competitive. It's everyone against everyone. So no wonder it feels like the world is against us all and there's some conspiracy, because in education we're trained to not cooperate, have success, individual goals, individual separation, as if anything happens in separation and individually. It doesn't. We're trained by the thought sphere of the whole collective to think in individuality, yet we got all those thoughts from the collective. So there's something that can be created where we operate together and understand that we're thinking together, not separate thoughts that aren't separate because we were programmed with them. So there's a lot that I wrote down about this very complex dynamic, and it's fascinating. And I feel also, too, that getting a label and a diagnosis, and I've talked about this, says don't think for yourself anymore. And since part of the process of so-called psychosis is restoring the brain to thinking for itself and learning for itself, even if it's not quite congruent with so-called consensus reality, the brain is attempting to put those learning capacities back online. So when that process comes to an end and one is again swallowed up by the dominant paradigm of don't learn anything, just obey authority and act in line with the thoughts and programs and invisible curriculum that you've been programmed with through your education, which is less about learning and more about creating a certain type of human that will fall in line of the current consensus structures. And I don't even know what I was talking about anymore because I babbled for so long. And that's the thing. They talk about memory in these games to get memory back online. We don't need memory anymore. If we're working together, we're all together in something, we're creating, it's moment to moment. What do we need memory for? We need it if we're planning all these things separately and not putting our brains together and not working together. But I have created ways for myself to remember certain things for functionality's sake, like leaving things out where I can see them, because my peripheral vision will pick up on them, and then I'll remember because I saw it in my peripheral vision, because I'm not focusing, because I'm not paying attention to focused goal thoughts. My perspective is zoomed out and relaxed, and I can pick up on things in my visual field, which is related to seeing the present moment. So it's complex, and I'm seeing too, since I left the theater and I'm on break here, a lot of this medical system is because of inattention, moment to moment, which is thought, which is stopping and organizing images and sounds in our head in order to approximate the moment or the next period of time, and then acting based on a pattern for that period of time, which is not adequate action. So, for example, creating a goal of I want to do this in 10 years, and then negating my health, which is not paying attention to the whole field of life, projecting a particular goal, moving according to that, and negating other areas. And then all of a sudden I have some medical problem and I'm in a hospital and I'm not quite figuring out why. And then I divert the understanding of that part of life to the medical authority. Someone was looking at me. Yeah, I'm talking to myself on a phone. So, yeah, I won't talk to myself here because who knows, people will come and be like, what are you doing? You're in a hospital, they have security and cameras, whatever. So yeah, I'll talk about that on audio because there's a lot and it's easier to edit it or not edit it. And it'll be a lot of babbling, and my videos yesterday sounded a little crazy. And I think it's also showing that by being inconsistent and creating a lot of context, there still is some kind of trajectory that one goes on. One still manages to live. So, and not according to a pattern. Whatever. I made a face at that nurse, sort of, who looked at me like, what the hell? And then I felt some pain in my heart, and I realized I did that to myself. They don't know what context I'm sitting in. They were just curious. And why should I be angry at someone for being curious? Because our brains go into curiosity as people who go into map consciousness and trans consciousness. And then it starts learning again, and then eventually we get punished for learning outside the box of consensus reality and seeing beyond our limitations that are imposed on us through education. And everyone's suffering from that. And also, I need to remember not to be angry because this psychiatric paradigm is a holding pattern. It's holding some of us, a lot of us, but one can get mad that an airplane is put in a holding pattern and delayed from landing, but the plane eventually will land. It's a holding pattern. It's time. It's buying time. As long as we're alive, even if we're in the worst psychiatrized position ever, we still have a chance to come in for a smooth landing. And these are the things I forget all the time. I want to create a new story and get out of this story. And I will, after this month is up. And yeah, this really is an experience of hearing what they are saying about us. One of the introducers of the speaker, within probably 2 minutes, maybe 5, said mental illness, relapse, symptoms, schizophrenia, and something else, probably like 5 times each at least. It was mind-boggling. I recorded some of it, but I didn't get the beginning part. But it was just awful.
The only thing I think, in terms of some of the work we've done in recent psychosis, and certainly I encourage more broadly, is looking at the body and physical exercise, actually, I think is something that can really help with the negative kind of symptoms of the illness, provided there's enough of a program in place to encourage patients to participate in exercise. But what's really exciting about cognitive remediation and thinking about that and so on is that it brings to the focus on schizophrenia is not just thought about in terms of affecting the mind, it affects the body and particularly the organ we're talking about here is the brain, right? Because cognition is a function of our brains. Cognition in schizophrenia is really very challenging and very interesting to think about, actually. We think about people, kids, who have intellectual disability, right? So their cognition is not as good as people who don't have intellectual disability. And that, schizophrenia, the cognitive problems like intellectual disability. Well, no, it's not actually, because kids with intellectual disability have that from the beginning, right? From birth, and it lasts all their life. Schizophrenia is not like that. People who have schizophrenia, we know their cognition was good when they were kids and born, and it didn't start then, because we can see the cognitive problems at the start of the illness. It's there at the time that the illness starts, but it probably changed sometime. We don't really know when. Is it like Alzheimer's disease then? Is it what we call these illnesses are dementia, right? They progress and the cognition gets worse over time, and elderly people die with Alzheimer's disease. So cognition in schizophrenia is not like that though either, right? It's there at the beginning of the illness, but it stays about stable. It doesn't seem to progress and get worse. It's really fascinating, you know, with colleagues in UK, Peter McKenna had some patients who were really quite cognitively impaired. Tested them, their IQ had dropped by more than 20 points based on what we thought it was when they were younger, and so quite cognitively impaired. Then he tested them again 5 years later, and 3 out of 5 had improved. You know, just their cognition was back to you know, being just a little bit below normal. So the cognition in schizophrenia is something that is just different than intellectual disability. It's different than dementia, and to me, it's something that could be reversible, could be malleable and changeable. Now, our treatments, the antipsychotic drug treatments I talked about, they're helpful with the symptoms and so on. There is one for the patients who don't really respond to those symptoms. Clozapine is helpful in those ones. It's probably an underutilized treatment. But I think for cognition, where the medications don't really have a lot of impact on cognition, take the edge off a bit, but what is maybe an underutilized and a treatment that needs to come around the cognition and have more research, have more application, is the cognitive remediation. So these are things, you know, I hope we have a chance to talk more about, hear more about from our speakers this morning and afternoon. And it is the source of a new hope, I think, for looking at the brain part of schizophrenia and how that impacts on the mind and the overall health of our patients. So that's, again, just my thoughts and summary. I hope with some of the things we'll want to hear more about as this goes along. So I'll now turn over to Susan to do more of it.
And then one of the guys here is one of them that, oh shit. Chocolate on my pants. I think that's karma for giving that nurse that look. But one of them here is the one that created a lot of the mental health acts around involuntary treatment to keep people from being incarcerated and ending up homeless. Chemical incarceration is only a little bit of a step better. Anywho. So I'm home from the conference, and regardless of all the content that happened all day long that was quite awful when compared to the context I've created for myself, when I got to the event, I was looking at the books on display for sale, and one was Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine, and it's related to trauma. And another book by him, and also a book by Brene Brown called Something About the Wilderness, and it's about, I forget, but something about by standing alone, something. But anyway, they both really resonate with me, so I'll probably buy them on Kindle and read them. And I did get a sample of the trauma book, and interestingly, it talks about what I was just talking about the other day when I was saying how Krishnamurti says that sorrow leads to passion. And the book is talking about how a lot of spiritual traditions say that suffering is a path of transformation. So again, I'm on this path of the universe bringing me things in actuality once I start to investigate. I'm ready to investigate this.